So before I start, I'd like to do a little experiment with you guys, which will help maybe make this more vivid and personal for you. You all hopefully have index cards and something to write with. And I'd like you to study these words. I'm going to read them, and then I'm going to also read them. Candy, sour, sugar, bitter, good, taste, tooth, nice, honey, soda, chocolate, heart, cake, eat, and pie. Okay? So you might wonder now if there's a test coming. And yes, there is. So don't write anything now, but think. Think of all the words from the list that you heard me say or that you read that you can recall. Okay? Now, write down on your little index cards there any of the words that you are confident that you heard me say. If you can, in your mind, you can hear me saying it, or you can picture having seen it. If you were, say, a witness in a court of law and you were asked on the witness stand which of these words were there, only write down the words if you were that confident. There's 3 words here: taste, point, and sweet. So it could be that one of them was on, any one of them, or that 2 of them, or that all 3 of them were on the list, or that none of them were on the list. So I'm not telling you, but if you think that any one or more of these was on the list, please write it down now. And I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it. Not too much time. Yeah, no, don't distract people. I always wondered why they played that on Jeopardy. They can't think with music. Yeah, that is why, right? Yeah. See, that's why I'm not a TV producer. Okay, so let's move on. The collectors, could you please collect the index cards? Thank you. And I will be calling for the data in about 10 minutes, or 9.7 minutes. So please keep that in mind. So before I talk about the unconscious, I thought I should define what I mean by unconscious and by unconscious processes in the brain. So as opposed to consciousness, we can define unconscious processes. And the modern definition are processes that occur automatically. You don't have to will them. You're not aware that they're happening. They take no effort on your part, and you generally have little or no control over them. So as a result of that, we often don't understand what's influencing us in our social interactions, because it's our unconscious mind working, the part of our mind that we have no access to. But I want to emphasize that this is a modern view of the unconscious. So this is not the Freudian or the Jungian unconscious. And the unconscious mind today in science and neuroscience and psychology is not an unconscious that can be accessed by talking to the person or through therapy. It's something that is inaccessible to you because of the architecture of your brain. And in particular, I'm going to talk about a field called social neuroscience. And social neuroscience is a combination of 3 different fields that merged around the year 2000. One is social psychology, which is the study of how we interact with each other. And social interactions for the human species are much more complex and important for our life and our survival historically than for any other animal. So social psychology and our social interactions are really something that define who we are, even as a species. Cognitive psychology is the psychology of how people think and make decisions. And in the middle, that graphic in the middle illustrates the 3rd field, which is neuroscience. And in particular, neuroscience has really exploded since the mid to late 1990s, when a new technology called functional magnetic resonance imaging became available, fMRI. Now, you've heard of MRI, where your doctor takes an image of your organs. The F in front of fMRI stands for functional, which means not only are we getting an image of the structure of your organ, in this case the brain, but also what part of it is active. In this slide, for instance, the yellow and the green parts are, yellow and the red parts are parts that are active as this person is thinking about something. Now, fMRI was a revolutionary tool for psychology because through the century or so that psychology had existed as a field, no psychologist could ever get into the brain to see what someone was thinking. So all psychology had to be, in a sense, behavioral, or analyzed by observing the behavior of people. And now psychologists could look into the brain and see what structures in the brain were acting and interacting to produce the behavior, and it brought the field to a whole new level. And let me just show you one example of the power of fMRI. Went the wrong way. This slide comes from an experiment that was done at Berkeley, in which subjects were put into an fMRI machine, which is like an MRI machine. You slid into this cylinder, and you can hardly move. And in this case, the subjects had glasses on in which the experimenters projected images. And here's a sample of 4 images. So as the subject was watching each image, the fMRI machine would shoot electromagnetic waves into their brain, take readings on what came out, and put this together to guess what they were looking at. So as the fMRI machine is analyzing their brain, scientists had written a program to try to reconstruct the images that the people were looking at, and here is what they came up with. And they're astoundingly close. They're not only close in the pattern of light and dark, but in the composition and even in the theme. So this is probably illustrates as close as we can to a kind of mind reading that you can do electronically today for people, and it's only going to get stronger and more powerful in the future. So I want to talk about the unconscious and social perception, but since I only have a very limited time left, I'm going to start with I'm going to talk about visual and audio perception, which is analogous to our social perception. The same sorts of processes go on, but it's easier and more vivid to illustrate them in the context of vision, hearing, and memory. And I'll illustrate the general principles, but keep in mind that what's really interesting about the principles is their application to your social perception, how you judge people and how you judge situations. And my takeaway point is this, that our physical perceptions, such as vision and hearing, our memory, and even our social judgments of other people, of business situations, are not really what's there, but they're a construction that is made by your unconscious mind and your imagination, based partly on some partial data that's there, but also a lot of unconscious processing. And the unconscious processing takes that data and massages it and uses your prior knowledge, your beliefs, even your desires, to make what seemingly clear picture of what's going on, even though it's based on very limited data. So everything I'm going to tell you today is focused on that one point. So let's start with this simple slide in vision. When you look at a scene, you see, if this was the side of the road, let's say, you'll see a scene like this. Now, I said that our social perception and our physical perception, and even our memory, is not based on what's really there, it's based on limited data. So let me now show you the limited data that is picked up by your retina when you look at a scene. So the next slide I'm going to show you, next to this one, is going to be a literal depiction of what your retina picks up. If there was no unconscious processing, if there was no visual processing in your brain, then when you looked at this scene, this is what you would see. So your retina picks up only this data. It's fuzzy, it's limited, it's pixelated, it's only clear in a small area in the center, and it even has a hole in it where your optic nerve attaches to your retina. And somehow your brain, just like Photoshop, when you hit the sharpen button, your brain takes this fuzzy picture and gives you the illusion of a clear image. Now, no one can say that it really looks like that. That's what a human see, right? Who knows what a bat sees if a bat looks at that, or a grasshopper, or an alien? That's not a physics graph. That's a picture from a camera. So that is the picture that our brain provides to our conscious mind, but what it really takes in is that data. So let me illustrate some of the aspects of how your brain does that. And I said before that it's automatic and you have no control over it. Look at this checkerboard. When you look at the squares A and B, you'll see that B is a white square and A is a black square. That's, from the point of view of physics, totally false. A and B are identical. You have the illusion that A is lighter than B, because your unconscious mind knows that this is a checkerboard. Your unconscious mind takes into account that there's a shadow caused by that cylinder and that light is coming in a certain way, and it presents your conscious mind with the illusion that A and B are different colors. And you can't override that. If you stare at the screen, you can't see A and B as being the same because your unconscious mind doesn't allow that. You have no control over it, and fortunately, it's automatic. You don't have to work on it. If all your mind got was data of light coming on various pixels, and each time you saw a scene, you had to do that processing consciously, you wouldn't be able to move. We would have been eaten by lions and tigers long ago when we were living in Africa, and none of us would be here. You would be totally frozen. So it's very important that your mind does it quickly and automatically without your control, but one of the costs of that is that you have no control over it. And I want to also illustrate how your brain uses context here. So let me show you what happens to those squares A and B when I take away the checkerboard. Now I'm going to slide away the checkerboard and leave the squares there, and you'll see that in the absence of the checkerboard, you can actually see them as being the same. So now with the checkerboard gone, you can see the reality in a sense that square A and B are the same. But I mean, we can ask ourselves, what is reality? Because again, the feeling that this is the checkerboard is a very human feeling. A B probably doesn't see it that way. So whether it's really real or not is a philosophical question, but there are certainly two situations, one in which A and B are on the checkerboard and you see them one way, and one in which they're off and you see them another way. And from the point of view of physics, though, the answer to the question is A is the same as B. I'll show you another illustration of this here. I said that we are social animals, and this illustrates a part of our brain that is focused on human faces. Because as social animals, it's very important to us that we recognize our peers and that we also can sense what they're thinking and what they're feeling at any given time. Part of our development as a species was to cooperate with each other and to communicate with each other and to know who you're dealing with. And as we evolved, our brain therefore evolved certain special ways of handling faces. We're much worse at handling, let's say, the faces of dogs. I don't care how much you love dogs, you cannot distinguish dogs as well as humans, or trees, or buildings. So we have a special part of our brain that helps us distinguish people's faces and how they look and what they're feeling. This is also unconscious processing. The thing is that since we don't see people upside down normally, this doesn't work when we're upside down. This is built, as evolution tends to do, for a very practical purpose of seeing people, in this case, right side up. So when you look at these two President Obamas, they probably look fairly similar to each other. But one of them is actually horribly deformed, and that doesn't really come across until I flip them over. So now your unconscious mind tells you, no, one is deformed, the other one isn't. Again, you can't override that, and you didn't have to work on it. It just happened for you. Watch as I turn them back. And I'll turn it back again. So this is how in your social unconscious, in your vision, is helping you to recognize somebody, but it's not helping you when the person is upside down. So I talked a little bit about vision. Let me talk a little bit about hearing to show that these kinds of processes are not confined to vision. So like hearing, like vision, what we hear is not a direct result of what is there. It's what is there plus a lot of unconscious processing that presents to us the picture or the sound of what we hear. I'm going to play for you some music now that you may recognize.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alone there. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen. Yes, there are two paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road.
Okay, so that's from Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. So now that you've listened to that, I want you to think about something. Do you think that Led Zeppelin was clever enough to make a song that makes sense forward and also backward? I don't think it makes a lot of sense forward, but does it make any sense backward, okay? So I'm going to play it for you backward now, and I want to thank Michael Shermer, who's the next speaker, for these audio files, and this is a very interesting demonstration. So listen now to the song in reverse. All right, gibberish? I think it's gibberish. So that's one reality, okay? Now I want to see if we can get another reality out of this. I'm going to play you the exact same physical data, the same audio file, but now I'm going to give you a context. So just like with the checkerboard, those squares look different when they're on the checkerboard than when they're off the checkerboard, and who knows what's reality. I'm going to put some words on the screen for you. I want you to listen to the song and follow the words as this gibberish plays, and see if you don't now change your mind and think that this is also a song that makes sense backwards. Okay, so what's real? Is there a message in there or isn't there a message in there? So this is your unconscious mind taking data and presenting a reality to you. And the reason that Michael has this is he runs a thing called the Skeptic Society, and there are people who take Obama's speeches and play them backwards and tell you this is the hidden message in his speeches, and it's all over the web, and someone has to debunk this stuff, because the point is that when you give your brain, your unconscious brain, a certain context, you can't avoid using it to make the picture. And if I hadn't given this talk and you hadn't heard the gibberish before, if I had just come on the stage and said, hey, guess what? Led Zeppelin has satanic messages in their songs backwards, and I had given you these words and that song backwards, you would probably all go, oh my God, I can't, it's true. And maybe now you still think that, or maybe you don't. Oh, okay. Let me go back one. So I'm going to play it again just to show you that you have no control. See, now that I did that, I got to go backwards, I think. Okay. I want you to follow the words and listen to it, but don't hear the words and hear the gibberish. See if you can override your subconscious. So could you watch the words and listen and not hear the words? No, just like you couldn't see the squares on the checkerboard and not see them as being different. So these are some of the ways your unconscious operates, and some of the factors that affect your thinking. And to close, I want to go to a slightly different area, which is memory. And I want to show you how these same kind of processes work in your memory and reconstructing your memory from limited data. So years ago, people used to think that our memory was more or less a film of what happened. And that with time, the film faded and it got staticky and our memory faded. But now we know that's not at all the way it works. Your memory looks at a scene just like your retina looks at a scene, and it grabs a few pieces of data from that scene, just like your retina has that fuzzy picture. Then when you remember something, your brain takes that fuzzy data and it takes the context that we've talked a lot about, it takes your prior beliefs, it takes your desires, and it puts it all together and it makes a guess as to what your memory is, and then it presents it to you as if it's a clear picture, just like the photograph. And you don't have any idea that this is going on, and you go, oh yeah, I remember that, and it's very clear. That's why you probably had the experience talking to a friend or your spouse, and you both remember the same thing, and you remember it completely differently, and you both remember it clearly, right? Because you can remember it clearly and be wrong, okay? Because your brain is putting it together, and it can be biased based on what you want to remember as well. So the reason I did the little experiment at the beginning was when I talk about these things in front of groups, people have a tendency to go, well, I know that can happen, but it just doesn't happen to me. So I want to show you that it happens to you too. Can I get the result? Thank you. Okay, I have to do a little mental tallying here, but so earlier I showed you a list of words, and I said which of these 3 words was on the list. And I tried to get you to be very careful to have a distinct memory, not to make any guesses. And I did this recently to a bunch of lawyers in a group, and they were all lawyers, and I told them that, you have to swear this in court and, give the highest legal standard, and they still said the same thing you did. And let me tell you what that is. So here's the words. You'll notice that taste was on the list, point was not on the list, and sweet, sweet was not on the list, but a lot of sweet things were on the list, right? So when you're recording this list in your memory, what your brain is doing is taking what psychologists call the gist of the list, the high points, right? And you're registering that. And then when you reconstruct it, you fill in the details. So the high point of this list, or the gist of this list, is sweet, really, right? Because look at all the sweet words on there. So when asked whether the word sweet was on the list, there's a tendency to have what's called a false memory, and you can think very clearly that sweet was on the list, even though it wasn't. So let's see how you guys did. 3 of you said point. Okay, that's pretty normal. There's always some random noise, but point wasn't on the list and doesn't seem like it should be on the list. Taste was truly on the list, and I have 54 tastes. And let's see, how many sweets were there? There were 60. So 60 sweets. More of you thought that the sweet, which wasn't on the list, was on the list than actually remembered that taste was on the list. So this is typical of the way people's memory works, and it has great implications in life and in the legal system, for instance, because, and again, I don't have time to talk about that now, but this is why eyewitnesses can often be very certain and very clear about what they saw and be completely wrong. And I talk about some unfortunate cases in my book. But my point, again, is not specifically, it's not about vision, it's not about hearing, it's not even about memory, but most of the book is about your social interactions with people and how when you meet somebody and when you talk to somebody, when you're in a business situation or thinking about a financial situation, you're taking in limited data, just like your eyes do, your ears do, well, just like your memory records, and your unconscious mind is processing that data and filling in a picture of that person or that situation, which seems very true to you, but is really a construction of your imagination, and that's something that we have to be aware of. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one comment.
Leonard, come back.
Just one comment.
Sorry?
I have just one comment. In the yogic traditions, the conscious mind is asleep. And there's no word for the unconscious. It's called the supraconscious that never sleeps. It is creating context, relationships, meaning, stories. And the goal of enlightenment is to wake up to it.
Oh, that's very good.